Good afternoon, Osric Chau. Welcome on VH Berries.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me.
I'm extremely grateful. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I had a lot of errands that I was running around today, but I'm glad I made it up. I made it here, got the setup ready, and yeah, this is pretty cool. This is exciting. I haven't done my own setup like this before, so this is cool. Usually it's either this or the camera for audition tapes, voiceover auditions, and now I'm like combining the two powers.
You are combining the two powers. And if I understood correctly, Osric, you mean that usually the auditions, video and sound are terrible.
No, they're not terrible. Usually you'll focus on one. So as an actor, you'll do auditions with the video camera. So I'll just use my phone and the audio is good enough. For voiceover auditions, you'll have the mic set up. But it's hard to kind of have a space where you can perform to do your acting scenes and have like a decent mic as well. I mean, some people have it. I just don't. So I either have a good mic or a good camera, never both.
I also think that you can also say that if the quality is very, very bad, the person in charge of the casting cannot see if you are playing correctly.
It's true. It can't be very bad, but it has to be good enough, right? So it doesn't have to be amazing. It has to be good enough. It can't be really bad because then that's just distracting.
You have such a wonderful energy. I don't know if it's come from your career as a stuntman that we will discuss later, or in the martial arts, or maybe that this is because you've played in numerous super hero and superpower movie and that the power remains in you.
I have no idea. It's hard to look at yourself sometimes, but I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you so much, Victor.
Let's retrace the journey of your life, Osric Chau, because you are one of the cases of actors leaving Los Angeles, and right now you are in Vancouver, Canada. That
is correct. Over the course of the pandemic, I have realized that I don't need to be in LA. So any aspiring actor, if you're not living in LA, you kind of think of going to LA at some point, or New York or one of the big cities. And for me, I ended up there as well. And I always thought that I had to be in Los Angeles. You know, all the big auditions, casting rooms, meetings are there, and you know, they probably still are, but during the course of the pandemic, we started doing all these Zoom meetings and calls, and all of a sudden even though I was in LA, I didn't feel like I had to be in LA, and I was just talking to my family a lot and realized that I really had to be in Vancouver to be with my family. And, you know, I think I'm at the age right now, I'm certainly feeling getting older a lot faster than I ever thought I would. But, you know, I recognize that my parents are getting older too, and I don't want to miss that time away from them. So I wanted to spend more time with them here, and considering that almost everything that I end up filming is in Vancouver anyways, it just made a lot of sense. So I moved back to Vancouver to be with my family, to work here, to just kind of ground myself a little bit, because I've been living out of a backpack for almost 10 years now. Like, even though I had a place in LA, the first like 5 years, I didn't. I couch surfed. And then even when I had my own place, I never unpacked because I would always be leaving somewhere pretty soon. So it never really felt that, grounded. So this is the first time in my like life possibly that I can remember anyways, where I'm finally in one place, and I'm happy to be here.
You're finally in one place and happy to be here. And do you still miss some of the stuff back in Los Angeles, looking back right now?
I miss my friends there. It took me 7 years to build a community in LA. And honestly, like, that's the hardest part and the most important part. So once you have that community, like, that city just transforms, and it turns into something magical, because otherwise it can be quite isolating, even in a city of like 4 million plus people. So I certainly miss my friends there. There's all sorts of events and things that you can do, but I think for the most part I'm a homebody, so I don't necessarily want to go out of my way to go to these events, even though I know I should sometimes. And yeah, I just prefer staying at home watching a movie.
You just use a very powerful word, which is homebody, because you started your career with a sport that can be done and practiced inside. And I'm talking about the martial arts and the stunt areas. Can you tell us a little bit more about this very spacious a field in which you were amazing, and that gave you the opportunity to start in the acting career?
Okay, I will say it depends on the type of martial art. Some martial arts you can practice indoors safely. Others you kind of want more space.
I was just trying to make a transition.
No, that was a good segue. I practiced several different martial arts. I practiced Wing Chun, which you can do anywhere. You don't really need to move all too much. And then the other one that I did is called Wushu, which is a Chinese performance martial art. That one you definitely need some space. Nowadays they practice on like spring floors, like gymnastics floors. But back when I trained, it was just on the concrete outside at the local park, Queen Elizabeth Park in Vancouver. And I loved it. I had begged my parents to put me in like a karate school or a taekwondo school for years as a kid, because I would watch like Van Damme movies, Jackie Chan movies, Jet Li movies, and they were really expensive for classes. I didn't know that at the time, but they were expensive. And so my mom, she would go through the Chinese classified section every day, and eventually she saw an ad for free classes. This like Chinese coach from China came, and he wanted to teach, he wanted to find students. So he was doing like introductory classes, and eventually like my mom like dragged us over there. I didn't know what it was. And, we just got hooked like right away. We didn't really know what it was, but we started doing it, started feeling good about it. And that first summer, me and my brother, we went to 2 classes every single day, and we just got better and better and better. And we knew we were starting pretty late. I was about 13, and I just wanted to be the best in the world. And so I just trained as much as we could. And in 2007, I ended up going to the Beijing Sports University. I did a semester at that university for martial arts, for Wushu specifically. That same year, I went to Montreal, and we had the national team trials. So I was competing against Canada. I didn't really compete all that much before, but one of my first big competitions was the national level. I made the Canadian national team, and before we went on to any kind of competitions, I booked my first movie, which was actually a mini series. It was a 2-part movie, and that kind of changed my whole career. They hired me because I could act and I could do my own stunts. So I always saw myself as a stunt person. I had an agent at the time. He saw me as an actor, and when he found out that I could do stunts, he kind of flipped out, and he's like, why didn't you tell me? And I told him, like, it's on my resume. I have like this little section of special skills, and one of them is like martial arts. And he's like, I represent Asians. Everyone says they can do kung fu, but no one can actually do it. Certainly not this well. And so like he went crazy, and sure enough, like within a week of him finding out, I get that job. And after that, it was just I was an actor, so yeah, kind of just went that way, and I was very happy for it.
Osric Chau can act, can do martial arts, and in addition of that, he has a great setup. Oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like nowadays, I'm old and broken, and like the kids coming up nowadays are so good. It's so good. So I'm an old dinosaur now. Like I have a saying now. Like I've passed the point of needing to train my body. I need to train my mind, because the body's deteriorating too fast, and I don't have Alzheimer's just yet. So
at the beginning, you just mentioned the fact that you trained 2 times per day, which is very intense. So
I mean,
I assume that
you do that while you can. Like when I was at the Beijing Sports University, we were training 8 hours a day, every day. Like that was my life. I didn't do anything else. I woke up, ate breakfast, went to train, watched a class train, like the advanced class, and then I would go have lunch, and then we go train again. Then we do weights, and then we'd do another class, and then we'd go home and we'd watch videos, and then we'd wake up at 6 a.m. the next day and we'd do it again. And we did that every single day for like 6-7 months. And like looking back at it now, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Like I take a walk across the street now and I'm sore. Right? So like it's just so crazy to think that there was a time in my life that I was able to do that. And I think my body remembers, right? So you kind of have like some kind of memory in your system. So if I start exercising regularly, I will notice that my body changes shape fairly quickly. And I think it's just because like I've been there before. If I'm telling my body, like, here are all the signals, we're gonna do that thing again, like everything will kind of fall in line. So that's kind of cool. That being said, almost all of the martial art coaches and masters that I know, they're all kind of they kind of let themselves go after a while. So I feel like as much as your body can go back to where it was, it also lets loose really easily. So if I do nothing, I feel like I'll just end up being a blob, and I'm okay with that. It fits the couch really nicely.
And Osric Chau, doing martial arts gives you an advantage. But I also think that on movie sets, there are a lot of footage and a lot of cuts. So it's easier in post-production to make it look more realistic, which means that some actors don't need to do martial arts. I don't know if I'm correct, but this is just a hypothesis.
Well, to be fair, we have such incredible stunt performers nowadays that you don't need to be able to do any of the things. Like it certainly helps if an actor can perform the stunts that they need to, but even if they can, the insurance producers, they might not allow them to do it, right? So you rely on these incredibly talented stunt performers who are there to essentially make the actors look good, right? It helps for an actor to understand the movement, to understand the blocking of what's happening so that they can sell the movement. So even if you're not doing the move, if you know how it starts and how it begins, you can come into or out of those movements in a realistic way, right? So, I mean, these are all very minor details. I don't even know if your everyday audiences will be able to figure out the difference, but for a trained eye, those are the things that you pick up on. And for myself as a performer, I will always have a stunt double. And they're probably always going to be like way better than I am, as they should be. That's their job. They train every day now, not 10 years ago like I used to. They're doing that now, and they're getting better and better, and they're great at what they do. And so you rely on their skill set to do the things that they need to do. And then for me, I just try my best to make sure that I can complete the movement, right? So they do like 90% of it. You do the last 10%, but you also have to do that last 10% very well in the action stuff anyways.
And Osric Chau, one another very realistic costume that you had is the one in Star Trek Discovery, in which you played Oros.
Yeah. That was an experience for sure. So one of the things they asked me during the audition was, "Are you claustrophobic?" And I wasn't quite sure why they were asking that. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And so sure enough, it was like a full prosthetic, and part of that procedure is they cover your entire head with silicone. And so like they have someone who just like flicks the silicone off your nose because it's just running all over your face. So if that person's not there, it's quite easy to suffocate. So it can be quite claustrophobic because your whole head is like covered with like paper mache or something. And it's like that for like maybe 30 to 40 minutes. And And so that's kind of terrifying. And then when you actually put the costume on months later, I had no nose hole, so I couldn't breathe out of my nose. I had to breathe through my mouth. And so the difficulty in this was like I couldn't eat, right? And like I remember the first day, it was like that's when I started feeling the claustrophobia, because I like to snack a lot, and I was trying to snack and I was like suffocating when I was trying to eat, and it was so sad. But by the second day, I kind of figured it out, and I just had to like take a deep breath, and then I'd put whatever snack in my mouth, and I would chew really fast, and I would try to like exhale as I was eating, and I got pretty good at it. So day one was a little traumatic, but after that, I feel very comfortable. Like I could probably do a whole show in that prosthetic now. Just needed a day to adjust.
You needed a day to adjust, and I hope that one day we will see a time-lapse compilation of the costume removal and the costume when it was put it on you.
I think the VFX people have... I think they did take footage of that. I'll have to check with them. They might have. I can't remember. That was months ago. Like, I forgot I did the show. That was in, like, May of last year, and then it came out 8 months later, so... Usually by the time a show comes out, I will have forgotten that I've done it at all, unfortunately. But having seen it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. Some parts I don't remember at all, even with the help. But it's fine.
You mean that during the hours, during the time they put it all the costume, you were asleep?
Yes, I absolutely. It takes about 2 hours to put that all in, and it's like 4 a.m., so it's very easy to sleep.
And Osric Chau, when I'm taking a deeper look at the span of your career, I realized that you have went through a true creative transformation, and that this transmission of a specific value is crucial and essential in your work.
I feel like I've probably been through several transformations. You know, if I have one mantra in life in terms of what my purpose is, it is to learn, right? Like I never profess to know everything. I certainly know very little, and all I can do is continue to learn and educate myself and hopefully better myself, because I want the tomorrow me to be better than today me. And certainly I have a lot of things that I could improve on. And that's all I try to do, is try to be better, because I don't know how else I would want to live. It just feels very pointless otherwise. So yeah, just constantly trying to be better.
You want to constantly trying to be better, at the complete opposite of the Tomorrow's World of the movie 2012.
Oh yeah, well, tomorrow doesn't even happen for a lot of people, unfortunately. Yeah, I think we just have to be grateful. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how bad you had. Like I've had some really terrible times in the last couple of years, and you know, I always have to remind myself, I'm like, hey, I'm still here. Family's still here. They still love me. You know, I have a lot to be grateful for, and sometimes it's so hard to remember and remind yourself of the things that you have around you, because the negatives are so much, like they're just so strong and prevalent in your field of vision that you forget. But I try to remind myself of all the good things that I have in my life, so that I can appreciate them while they're still there, because they're not going to be there forever either.
Of course, and I just made a reference to one of the movie in which you played, which is 2012, which was a movie that was a headline back in 2008 or 9, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it came out in 2009. We filmed it in 2008. And this was the movie that followed that first project that I got, the Kung Fu movie this was the second job I got directly after that, and this one certainly changed my life. It was a big blockbuster film. I think it was like $200 to $300 million budget. To this day, I think it's still the biggest movie that has ever come through Vancouver, and I had a supporting role in it. So I was on day one of that shoot, and I was on day, like, the last day of the shoot, which was, I don't know how many, like 100 something. It was kind of insane. That had the most money on a production that I've ever seen, and it's hard to fathom another production doing what they did. Like, we had a Tibetan village that we filmed for one day. They spent 3 months building it. We filmed one day and then they tore it down. Like, I'm like, that you just spent 3 months building an entire village for one day. It just seemed excessive, but they did it, and the movie did really well. They made almost $1 billion back, so good on them, and I thank them for putting me on the poster. And again, that one was the one that kind of launched my career, and it kind of solidified the fact that, like, in my mind and I think my family's mind, like, okay, like, Osric, you might actually be an actor. This might be your career for here on out. And then I just kind of, I went with it and made it happen.
These are the words coming from your mother, for example.
Well, I don't know if they said those words, but I think there was a feeling in the room that I'm gonna take as they implied it. No one knew anything, right? Like, at the time, there weren't that many Asian actors. In fact, no one I knew could name a professional Asian actor, right? Beyond Jackie Chan and Jet Li, no one could name one. And so it didn't make sense for me to pursue this career path. And so the reason why I say my family kind of gave me their blessing was because they said, hey, if you want to do this, you should move to China, right? Like, you should consider going to China, where all the Chinese roles are, where they actually have Chinese people in film and TV. And so I did. I moved to China for a little bit. I lived there for a couple of years, and the first thing that I learned was that I'm very Canadian. As much as I am of Chinese heritage and descent, I am very Canadian, and I could not. I recognized how different the values are and how different the culture is, and I just felt like I was pretending to be someone that I wasn't, in trying to pretend like I was a local Chinese just because I looked like I was.
If I understood correctly, Osric Chau, you mean that you are losing this sense of authenticity.
Yeah, and I think as an artist, as a performer, you're just trying to find your true self, right? Like, we're just constantly discovering ourselves. Like, who are we? What are we supposed to be? Who do we want to be? Right? These are the questions that I'm always asking myself. And sometimes you turn into something that you hate. And you're like, well, this isn't the direction I want to go in. How do I change that? Right? And as a performer, as a person, we have to make those choices. And if we're not heading in that right direction, we have to assess our lives, and then we make those decisions that will kind of turn us in the right course, right? So at that time, as a performer, I wasn't fulfilled. I felt like I was missing something in life, and I think a big part of that was that even though I was working, I didn't feel like I was doing myself a service, I guess, because I wanted to make change in my own community, and unfortunately China wasn't my community. Like, I loved living there. I loved my time there. I loved my friends there, but it just wasn't my community. And I felt like I wanted to go back to North America and make a mark for the Asian Americans, Asian Canadians here, because I knew the struggles that I faced growing up, and I didn't want other people to have to go through those same struggles. And that was kind of a launching point in terms of me finding a purpose for myself in what I was doing. And in China, I just didn't really have that beyond needing to find work for the sake of it.
And without any surprise, and very ironically, in the year 2012, you started playing in Supernatural, which introduced you starting from the season 7.
Yeah. So Supernatural was, I mean, that would be the next like big launching point in my career. Didn't know it at the time. I didn't even know the show at the time. Never really heard of it. I was passing through Vancouver from Beijing on my way to LA, and I just had an audition. And so I went to the audition, and then I went to LA for another audition, and I got offered both parts, and they told me I couldn't do both of them. So I declined Supernatural, went with the other one, and eventually the other one, they're like, oh, well, it's actually the same company. They're both Warner Brothers. We don't want to lose an actor. We'll work it out. And so the other one didn't go through when Supernatural happened. And even like when I was on set, like didn't really think much of it. Just really nice people. We're making a TV show. And then a couple episodes in, I remember like some of the guys, like, I mean, I couldn't even figure out Jared and Jensen's name at the time. I kept mixing them up. I'm like, they were both tall white guys with J names. It's just so confusing. And I remember, I think it was Jared. Jared started telling me, he's like, oh yeah, like just so you know, like fandom's intense. You're gonna start hearing about these conventions and all that, and just like, you know, have fun with it, appreciate it, blah 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 blah. And I had no idea what he was talking about or why he was talking about this stuff. And turns out, show has a massive fan base, and you know, it just, yeah, that changed my life forever. I started going to Comic-Cons as a guest. I used to go to Comic-Con a lot, and all of a sudden I went to Comic-Con as a guest instead of just an attendee. So it was certainly a big shift, and a weird transition, because I don't know, you see something from one perspective this whole time, and then all of a sudden you're on the other side. You know, there's certainly an adjustment that takes place, and yeah, it was crazy, but it was fun.
And Osric Chau, during this very important transition, coming back to Vancouver, another very major portion of your works includes this ability to wanting to explore more and to contribute to your own community through developing some television series, for example, on CBC Bell.
I mean, that's what I'm working on now, right? Like nothing set in stone, but I've been watching a lot of Canadian content since I've been in Canada, and I it's nice, you know, it's nice to just watch and hear stories about where you're from, you know, and I forgot about that. I think I was so obsessed with like living in LA, being an LA actor, trying to create content for Hollywood, you know. And at the end of the day, I'm so proud of being Canadian. I love Canada so much, and having lived here now, I just want to do stuff for Canada, right? And so I started watching a lot of CBC shows, and I'm like, oh man, this is great. I can definitely do something for my hometown. I want to do something like for Vancouver, for Richmond specifically, which is where I'm at. I want to do something for my hometown that like my parents can appreciate, because they also live here. We have so little in common, but we all know this city, right? So I think it's also trying to set up something else for me to connect with my parents on. So I'm very excited to develop Canadian content, and whether or not I end up working with CBC or Bell or Crave or whoever, that remains to be seen. But I'm certainly going to try.
If I understood correctly, Osric Chau, you mean that you are now wearing different and new hats. For example, a hat for producing.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to be on the producing side, to be writing. I directed my first short film last year that I also wrote. It's quite fun. I think as an actor, a lot of the times you feel like you don't really have much control over anything. And so you're kind of reliant on having like trust in the teams that you're working with. And sometimes that's great because most crews are great. Most creatives are really good, but sometimes you'll come across a couple that'll just like put that thought in your head and you're like, I would have done this differently. I would have done that differently. Why are we doing this? And I think if you find yourself asking that question a lot, you probably should try being on the other side, and you'll either learn to appreciate just how hard it is, and you're like, oh, okay, I definitely understand why they did that. There's no other way of doing it, or you'll just like really embrace it, and you're like, oh my God, I can do the things that I've been complaining about, and now I can do something about it. So or both, right? So I certainly appreciate being able to kind of affect the change that I want to see, but I certainly understand the incredible amount of pressure that a director has on a set. It's like, if things screw up, it's your fault, right? If we don't make our day, it's your fault. Like, it pretty much, if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. So you just gotta be good, right? And I think I'm at the point where I feel like I'm experienced enough to kind of take on that burden of responsibility. There's so many people that I've worked with over the years that I think are incredible at their jobs. And so there's a joy in being able to put together that talent so that we can do a fun project as well and create something special. So there's certainly a lot that I appreciate of being on the other side of camera that I want to explore a lot more of.
Osric Chau, you just mentioned a 7-letter word that means a lot for me. This word is control, because I believe that the ownership is something that is very crucial in the entertainment industry and even beyond.
Yeah, and again, as an actor, you have very, very little control. I mean, at the beginning, you're just hoping to get an agent. You're sending all these emails to agents. You're hoping I hope someone gets back to me. I hope someone will represent me. And then you get an agent, and you're going to all these auditions. Well, you're hoping for auditions for one. Like, I can't wait till I get an audition. You get auditions. You're like, oh man, I hope they like me. I hope the casting director is like, did it feel weird? Like, was it weird for them? Because it was weird for me. I don't know. And like, you're always like looking to the other side for some kind of feedback or acknowledgement. And you're like, please just like validate me and my feelings. Like, that one felt really good for me. I feel like I'm perfect for the role. And you just don't know because you have no control. And even when you're on set, if you got the job, you were the one that they chose out of hundreds of people. You're on set, you do the scene, you didn't really feel well, and they're like, moving on. You're like, but did we get it? Because honestly, I felt like I got 40% there, and I have another 60 that I want to get closer to. And they're like, no, we got it, moving on. And you're left doubting yourself as to whether or not you did a good job. So you have very little control. And I think I struggle with that because to some degree I'm a perfectionist, but I also like appreciate the collaboration of film and TV. I think that's probably the most fun aspect of it. And part of me going on the other side is I need to understand what everyone else is doing so that I can do my part better. And I know that I can trust someone when they say, we got it, we can move on, because I understand what they're looking for that specific shot. Right. And so I think in understanding everyone's role, you kind of get better at doing your own thing, and you know what to focus on when you need to focus on it.
Absolutely. And during your early career and the early stages of your career, you were always keeping that momentum, because when I'm talking to you and listening, I feel that your mental health wasn't really that affected because you knew your worth and you knew your values.
I mean, if I can take pride in anything, I suppose it would be my mental resiliency. I mean, that being said, like it's still really easy to forget. Like, I mean, we just went through a worldwide pandemic. We might be in the middle of a war right now. Like, there's so much happening, and I certainly went through a couple of tough periods that it's easy to forget that you're a capable person. It's easy to forget that you can do all the things that you can do. Right? That you've succeeded before. You can definitely succeed again. And sometimes all you want to do is just like give up and die. And, I think it's so easy to fall into those traps. And, sometimes all it takes is for someone to say, hey, you're not all those things you think you are right now. Let me remind you of the things that you've done before. You can definitely do it again. Right? And so like, I think that's my favorite thing about film and TV. It's a collaborative process. Like sometimes you do things on your own, but it's still, you're doing it on your own, but in a greater cause. Like everyone comes together, and when you're down, you have partners there to lift you up. And when they're down, it's your job to lift them up, right? Like you're all in this together. So I think that's the amazing part of this industry, is that we have to find those people, that community, right? And it's the same with honestly anything. Like living in LA is tough without a community, because when you're down, you're just down by yourself. There's no one there to lift you up, right? And so I think it's the same for anyone in any industry. Like the people you surround yourself with is so important. And if they're making you feel terrible, then maybe they're not the best for you. If they're making you be a better version of yourself, then you're probably heading in the right direction.
And one key point that I can add to go into the right direction is to just breathe, but not breathe like Oros in Star Trek. You need to breathe with the nose.
Yeah. I mean, definitely just like slow yourself down a little bit, calm, taking deep breaths certainly helps to kind of like just focus on the things that you need to focus on. So, I mean, I have a couple of philosophical pieces that kind of help lead me through. And another one that kind of helps keep me calm is, I will control the things. Well, I'll worry about the things that I can control, right? Anything else, I just have to forget it, right? Until I can do something about it, because otherwise you suffer twice, right? You suffer the worrying of what might happen, and you suffer the happening of it. But if there's nothing I can do about it, well, I won't think about it, because there's nothing I can do about it, right? So I only worry about the things that I can actively change and affect at this moment. Nothing else.
Nothing else. Osric Chau, I really appreciate your energy and your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Victor. It's been nice talking to you.